Today we are going to make mayonnaise from scratch. And we're not just making mayonnaise. When I make mayonnaise, I often use the stick blender. I use the food processor if I'm making enough. Today we're going to do it straight from hand. It's a tribute to Julia Child, who, well, I don't even know what to say about Julia Child. She changed how North Americans viewed French cuisine and their accessibility to it and understanding it and making it simple enough for them to be able to try. She had an amazing joie de vivre and a way of letting you know that you can do it and you might not do it perfectly, and that's totally okay. Do it anyway. And I love that philosophy. So this is the book that we're working from. It's actually, there are 2 volumes of this, Mastering the Art of Speaking, of French
You have to say it in Julia Child's voice.
I don't do Julia Child's voice. You can do that if you like, darling.
Mastering the Art of French. Anyway, sorry.
See, he's very good at that. I don't do voices. So, excellent 2-volume book that you can get all over the place.
That was my birthday present a few years ago.
It was. Yeah. It was. And now I'm using it. How awesome is that?
Go.
Not that it's the only time it's been used. Also, for me, Julia Child holds a special, somewhat strange place in my heart. When I was growing up in the 70s, in a sort of hippie-type household, we weren't allowed to watch TV very often, and daytime TV was absolutely forbidden. And I remember a few times walking in and seeing my mother watching daytime television.
Good heavens.
But it was educational. That's how she explained it, that it was somehow okay because it was educational. And on those occasions, it happened to be Julia Child. And I would sit with my mother mesmerized because I wasn't allowed to watch TV, or certainly not daytime TV. So I sat and I watched this giant woman with the strangest voice I had ever heard, cooking with cream and butter and throwing it about with abandon. And so Julia Child, I don't know if that's part of why I cook or not, but it's certainly a part of the memories I have of my mother, of my family, and of food. And all of those things are so intertwined and so important that I'm getting a little verklempt. Anyway, let's move on to making mayonnaise, all right?
Get on with it.
So what Julia Child says in the book is that you should start by warming your bowl. So this is hot water that's in the bowl. And I'm just gonna pour it out and dry the bowl. Seems like possibly a silly step. Maybe you could not do it, you could omit it, but you know what? Emulsifications, which is what mayo is, they can be challenging. You can be making your mayonnaise and it can break in the middle. So you want to do whatever tricks you can that are going to help you. And it's not a big deal to heat the bowl
is
first.
drying the bowl an essential part of that as well? Actually?
Yes, but she says to dry the bowl, but I have to say it's not 100%. This is a metal bowl. It's not going to be, and I don't think that the water is going to affect it. Another thing that was really, really important in the notes in the book is that your egg yolks are room temperature. So I actually took these out a while ago. She does say if you don't take them out in advance, you could put them still in their shell, in warm water, and that helps to bring them up to room temperature before you crack them.
And they're separated, right?
So what I did was I left them out on the counter for a while to warm up, and then I separated the whites from the yolks. We are only using the yolks here, and we're using 2 yolks. Her recipe is endlessly scalable. In fact, it's written more as a formula than it is as a specific recipe. So we're gonna do 2 eggs, that's 2 egg yolks, because that seemed like the right amount for us. So I'm just gonna put them into our warm bowl and start by just using a whisk to just beat the egg yolks. Even though there's nothing else in there, she talks about that as well. She talks about how egg yolks are kind of sticky and you need to give them a good
Sound thrashing.
Excellent, yes, a sound thrashing before you end up adding other ingredients.
Well, if you didn't have forearms before this recipe, you're going to have them afterwards.
It is really, it's a pretty good arm workout. You don't, as you can see, I'm changing, I'm starting in circles, and I'm going like this. You don't have to do it in one direction. You don't have to do it all the same way. If your arm gets tired, you can even switch hands depending on how good you are with your other hand. The reason I have the cloth underneath is because bowls have a way of skidding and getting out of control if you don't put something underneath them to give them a little bit of grip. So that's why that's there.
Your dog is fascinated.
He's not getting any mayo. I don't think it's good for
I
him.
don't think that's what he's thinking.
Well, maybe he gets to lick the bowl after everything's been taken out, of course. I don't know. We'll see. I'm not sure about dogs eating mayo. Yeah, a lot of fat.
Now,
Okay.
this is like one of the quintessential mother sauces in French cuisine, right?
Yeah, it's not one of the mother sauces. The mother sauces refer to like Béchamel and, gosh, I'm not thinking of all of them right now. But mayonnaise, this emulsion is a jumping off point.
Exactly. That's
For
sort of
making
what I mean.
other sauces, and like aioli, and we can talk a little bit in a minute about the difference between mayo and aioli. But right now,
How's that looking?
what I'm going to do is I'm going to add our next ingredients, which in this case happen to be, I've got some freshly squeezed lemon juice here. This is 2 tablespoons, and I will probably end up using the whole thing in there. But in her recipe, she talks about adding a tablespoon first and then reserving the rest for later. So you can decide if you want it more lemony or not. You can also use vinegar. I prefer lemon juice as a flavor in mayo.
Lemon's just better.
That's my personal preference. But hey, if you don't have access to fresh lemons, I would not use real lemon or something like that. I'd use fresh lemon, or if you can't, use a vinegar, a good quality vinegar. That'll be fine.
Sherry vinegar or something like that.
So like I said, this is 2 tablespoons, but we're only going to start with 1. This is sea salt, and again, kosher salt, whatever, as long as it doesn't have additives in it. And this is a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And this is 1/8 of a teaspoon of dry mustard powder. If you don't have this, you can actually use the same amount of Dijon mustard. I wouldn't put like French's yellow mustard in here. I don't think it really belongs, but you could also leave it out. It's optional, but it does actually add a lot to the flavor. So what I'm gonna do is, while I'm beating away, I'm gonna add some lemon juice. Add some salt, and add the mustard powder. Now, Rob had asked me earlier, isn't there pepper in this? Isn't there white pepper in this? And there could be white pepper in here. Her recipe suggests adding pepper at the very end so that you can decide how much you want to add and what you think is appropriate. And you could add either black pepper if you don't care what it looks like, or white pepper if you do care. Okay, so now that those other ingredients are fully mixed in, this is where we start the emulsification. You need to do it really slowly. There's just no way getting around this because I've broken mayonnaises in my day, and what I mean by that is that it separates and it's hard to get back together. And there are some cheats you can find online, and even Julia Child has it in her book. If it breaks, what can you do about it? But it's not going to break today, so I'm not going to show you that. So everything, all the other ingredients are in there with the egg yolk except for the oil. And we're going to start out super, super slow. And you have to keep whisking the whole time. And by super slow, I'm talking about literally drops, drizzle. Now don't worry, you don't have to do this the whole time, but you do have to do it in the beginning, otherwise it will not properly emulsify. And I guess it seems a little tedious, but you know what? If you want to do something well, do it right. Do it right the first time, you know? Because later, I'll be able to rest my arm. Later, I'll be able to add more oil, and it'll be worth it.
Remember when we had our ducks, we'd get duck eggs and make fresh mayonnaise with the duck eggs. It was amazing.
The duck yolks were this incredible orange color, and duck eggs are bigger and the yolks are richer than chicken eggs. So it was a really amazing mayonnaise.
And that's why we make it from scratch, because it's so much better tasting than the stuff you can buy.
It's quite different, you know, if
Yeah.
you're thinking that it's gonna taste exactly like that glass bottle with the blue lid, it doesn't, because that bottle that you buy at the store, and I like it, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying anything bad about store-bought mayonnaise, it's a different beast. Like many things that are homemade, to industrialize the practice, to preserve it so it has shelf life, all of that, things had to be changed to make that recipe work. And so it's just not the same. And your mayo, the color of your mayo is going to be determined by the color of your egg yolks. So it could be a lot lighter than this. It could be a very, very light yellow depending on the color of your egg yolks. So let's talk a little bit. I was talking about how, well, it's not a mother sauce. It has a similar place, I think, in French cuisine, in that other sauces are made from mayonnaise. And aioli is the one that I think North Americans are probably most familiar with that's similar, because you'll find every bistro, every restaurant in North America now seems to have something served with aioli. And it could be garlic aioli, which is actually redundant, and I'll get to that in a minute. It could be sriracha aioli, which is usually a mayonnaise with sriracha added.
Sambal is really good.
Sambal is excellent, but I don't find that as often in restaurants in town. Sriracha is more common. In any case, you can add anything to a finished mayo and change the flavor, because mayo's a bit of a blank palette, right? So I was doing some research on aioli, and it turns out that traditionally there's fights over whether it's Spanish or whether it's French, but traditionally it's made with 100% olive oil and garlic and nothing else. And it's made in a mortar and pestle, and you have to completely smush the garlic, there's that technical term again, and then slowly add the olive oil. The problem with that is that garlic is not an excellent emulsifier the way egg yolks are. So it can be really, really challenging to get that to emulsify. So apparently people started adding an egg yolk, and that's why it's much, much more like mayonnaise than the traditional recipe would be. But it's always made with olive oil, or it should be according to the sources that I read. And I'm not using olive oil here for my mayo. And you can, but I'll tell you why I'm not. Anytime that I have made 100% olive oil mayonnaise, and I love olive oil, I really, really do, I haven't liked the mayonnaise.
It's a bit strong.
It's too strong for mayo. It's an overpowering flavor. And if you're doing the mechanical version of this instead of the hand version of this, like I said, with a stick blender, with a regular blender, with a food processor, if you're doing that, the heat from the whatever the tech you're using, the mechanism that you're using, heats up the olive oil and brings out even more bitterness. And I don't like bitter mayo. So I have taken, as much as I love olive oil, I've taken to using sunflower oil. You can use grapeseed oil, avocado oil, canola if that's your jam, whatever neutral flavored oil you want. And you can even add, this is a cup of oil, of sunflower. But I could have added, say, a quarter cup of olive oil to that if I wanted that olive oil flavor in there.
I like about an 80-20 mix myself. But,
Good to know.
yeah, just
So you can see what's starting to happen here. It is fully emulsified, and it's starting to get ribbony,
oh yeah.
right? So now I feel
Paging Mr. Hillman.
like I can add it a little faster in a stream. And you know, my arm's getting a little tired, but I gotta say, I don't know, you know, if it's all the working out or what.
You're holding up well.
But it's really not that bad. So we're getting
I'm
there.
sure
We're
all
getting-
these people that are looking at this are going, cripes, how much time do you have to have in your hands to make your own damn mayonnaise? But it's like one of those things that if you really love real food, this is how you make the real deal.
That's exactly right. And you know what? You don't have to make it this way every time. As I said, today is a special tribute to Julia Child just because.
Well, we're very grateful.
But we are very grateful. But I often make this with a stick blender, and it's pretty much the same process where you have your egg yolks and your other ingredients, and you blend them together in the container that you're making your mayo in using the stick blender, and then you slowly drizzle in.
Same with a Hollandaise
The
sauce.
oil.
You can make a Hollandaise quickly with a stick blender, or spend half an hour doing this.
And we just wanted to do this to show you that it is possible. And you know what? During this time where we're all sort of sheltering in place and all of that.
Wow, look at that, eh?
Isn't that nice?
That's really cool. That's getting to be the real deal.
It is. So we have more time right now than we often do. And so I found myself doing things that I've wanted to do but haven't done. Like I made sourdough croissant because croissants have been on my list for a really, really long time. And you know what? I have the time.
You wrote an opera?
No, I really didn't. So here we go. I'm just gonna add the last bit. Now, that was a cup of oil. She uses, as I said, her recipe is more like a formula. I could add more oil to this, but she actually says if you're starting out, not that I am, because this is not my first time, but
Be gentle.
you don't want to try and incorporate more oil than a cup for the 2 egg yolks the first time around, because the chances of it breaking are higher if you add more oil. Because you're asking the egg yolks to incorporate more and more oil, and they get to the point where they're like, yeah, I'm not sure I want to do that anymore. So that's a pretty nice.
So do you get it, is it runny, or do you like to get it stiffer than that, or can you get it stiffer?
You
than
can
that?
get it stiffer. That requires adding more oil.
Oh, okay.
So the question is, do you want to do that and tip the balance, or are you willing to go with it runnier? Plus, once it's in the fridge and it sets
It'll
up,
settle up
and
a
yes, it must be kept in the fridge. We're talking raw egg yolks here, right?
That's an interesting question. How long can you keep it when you make that?
You know what? I don't know.
Because it never lasts that long.
It doesn't. If I'm going to bother to make homemade mayo, it usually disappears pretty quickly. I would go, as I always do, with smell and visual. So what does it look like? What does it smell like? And go from there.
So how does it taste?
Well, okay, so here we go. I'm actually going to taste. So it's pretty neutral. I get a little bit of the lemon. It's very tasty, very mayo-y. I think it needs a bit more salt. I'm gonna add a little. And I think Rob's right that a little bit of white pepper would not be amiss here. This is our major jar of white pepper. Isn't it beautiful? That's what happens when you get your white pepper in Chinatown. Okay. So I'm just thinking a smidge. And I see that there's a touch left of the mustard that didn't all go in there.
Oh, mistakes were made.
Now the question is,
what your guests don't know.
that was her famous dropping the turkey.
Dropping the roast on the floor.
Yeah. Just put it back on the plate. Okay. I highly recommend. There's a series where you can watch. PBS put out CDs. I mean, you can DVDs. I'm not sure where else you can access it, but of all of her shows from PBS, and she is a riot. And so, if you haven't watched Julia Child, if you just sort of know the name, she's like a cultural icon. I think it's worth it. She's highly entertaining.
She was fond of a cocktail too, that girl.
Yeah, but not like Graham Kerr,
I,
the Galloping Gourmet. He was drunk a lot. Okay, so that's pretty good, but I'm even gonna go a bit more salt. Not a lot comes out of here.
that's why often at the end of a recipe they say taste and correct for salt. And
That's true.
what you have to do. You can always put more in, you can't take it out.
So Rob, I'm gonna ask you what you think. Do I need more lemon? I don't think I do.
No, it's got enough lemon.
Yeah, that's what I
That's
thought.
pretty badass. I can hardly wait to add some garlic to that to put on our salmon we're gonna have tonight. So
Yeah, so that's actually where we're going with it. If you, like I said, if you wanted to make a sort of aioli, it's not really, as I said, traditional, you could either use a garlic press or smush your garlic with salt onto a chopping board on the side of your knife, and you can get a really good paste going. Add that. There you go. You got your garlic mayo. Same with
Chipotles with adobo sauce is another good one.
That would
too.
be great.
Just even a few drops of adobo in there is fantastic.
pesto is another one. You can add all sorts of stuff to flavor your mayo. But anyway, there you go. I'm just gonna get that into a jar and get it into the fridge. It's already looking a little bit thicker than it was, Rob. And I think once it sets up in the fridge, it'll be even thicker. But even if it's like this, that's not the end of the world. So I hope that you learned something today, and I hope that you'll try to make your own mayonnaise. Even, go ahead. There is no shame in using a stick blender, a food processor. Just remember that the same principles apply. Teeny little drops of oil at the start so that the emulsification happens, and then you can let it rip after that. Real food.
Awesome. Flex your forearms now.
No, I'm not going to.
Okay.